Blog Talk Radio.
Greetings, Stone Guardian, Crystal Keeper, Gin Lovers and Rockhounds. Welcome to There's a Rock for That.
Hello, and welcome to There's a Rock for That. I'm your host, Mary Brown. And today on the show, we are going to be talking about malachite, a crystal for this moment that we're all in, all over the world, that we're sharing in together, and how malachite is the perfect stone for us to be getting to know, working with, etc. But before we start getting into that, let me give you a little bit of info here. This is a live call-in show. I will be taking your calls during the second half of the show. I see plenty of people already on the switchboard. You still have time to call in to get in line. It's a first-come, first-served basis. The call-in number is 714-816-4628. That number again is 714-816-4628. And you call in, and then you press the number 1 on your dial pad. That kind of raises your hand, and it lights you up on the switchboard so I can see that you want to be air with me. And again, we'll be doing that during the second half of the show. But first, I have a lot of information to pass on to you today. Now, let me give you a little bit of the background here. You know, I'm sure some of you have heard me on other shows. I've guested on Sharona Rapsik's Magic Universe, and I've guested on the Friday show The Doctors Are In with Dax and Rose. And if you've heard me on those other shows, or you've heard me on our regular Saturday show, the Tarot Today show, you might have the idea that I do communicate with nature spirits. You know, we talked about fairies recently on the Doctors Are In show, and you know, crystals to me are also part of that kind of umbrella, let's say, of nature spirits. Some people call them crystal devas. Some people just call them crystal spirits. And, you know, I got an urgent message. I wasn't seeking it out, you know, because it's like my approach to all of this is I'm not one of those people that is going to tell you that every day angels are talking to me or every day I'm playing with the fairies. I've had communication from angels and have had communication from fairies and from crystal spirits as well, but I'm very open to it, but I'm not necessarily seeking it out. I feel like I'm just a messenger, pass on a message through the various channels, either on social media or by way of this radio show and other appearances that I make. You know, sometimes I feel like, you know, that's really just my job is to serve that community of the spiritual realm as well as my own human realm community as well. So I got an urgent message. As much as I could describe it, you know, as being like an urgent message, it felt very urgent. It was the spirit connected to malachite. And it was really kind of different because it was like, tell them everything about us. Tell them everything about malachite. And I thought about it, well, that's not really much of a message, you know, like tell them everything. What is everything? And so my first thing in my mind was like, okay, I'm going to have to go back. I'm going to have to really dig in and, you know, maybe I should get some new books. And it was like, no, you have what you need. You know, you've got the resources to tell them everything they need to know about malachite right now. And I'm like, okay, you know, so I didn't buy it, go out and, you know, try and buy new books, you know, that maybe there's one out there that talks about malachite specifically. Who knows? There is. It was like I didn't have time. I didn't have time to work with anything other than what I already had easily available to me at my fingertips. So, the understanding that I have of this urgent message from the Spirit of Malachite is that within all of the information I'm going to give to you today, each of you in your own way something's going to resonate with you, and it's going to be important information to you. Now, this is particularly about this time that we're in right now. I'm assuming it's connected to the global pandemic. I wasn't given the message that it's connected to the global pandemic, just that it's now. So that seems to be what's happening now all over the world. So I'm making that assumption. The other thing is that it's a lot of information, and I'm going to go through it as quickly as I can. I grew up, kind of on the East Coast, so I can be a fast talker. And what I would suggest is don't worry about trying to keep track and write it all down now. If you're listening live, all our shows are in archive. You can go back and you can listen to it, and you can then take, whatever notes or whatever information and apply it, and however you apply it, Now, okay, one thing I do want to say, a bit of a disclaimer here, is that, I'm not giving medical advice out here. I'm a spiritual life coach. I'm kind of, giving you more of the metaphysical, spiritual things that apparently are very important to consider right now in this time of crisis and great need on our planet. And after I talk about Malachite, I do want to say a couple of things about the pandemic, a couple other messages that I received that, I think the only reason I receive these kind of messages, because they don't seem personal, is that I'm supposed to share them, and so that's what I'll do, and they're kind of odd. But we'll get to that later. First, since Malachite was so intense about all of this, let's talk about Malachite. So what do we know? It's that beautiful green and black stone that has a little swirlies, and it's just gorgeous. And you've probably seen it a lot if you're into the show. You're probably into crystals, and it's pretty common. It's easy to come by, so it's very accessible. That's it, and usually pretty inexpensive. And so, those are some positives here. And the other thing about Malachite is that, I've always thought of it as a crystal with an edge to it. So there's certain ways that you should not use this stone, because it does have some toxicity issues, let's say. This is a stone that's commonly on the list of everybody's, toxic crystals. And the reason why that is that, you want to work with a polished form of Malachite, okay? You don't want to be handling rough pieces of Malachite where, like, the individual, like, little minerals and stuff can get all over your hands. And you don't want to make an elixir with it either, okay, unless you're using the indirect method, and the Malachite never touches the water that you're going to either drink or bathe with or spritz around the room. On an upcoming episode of There's a Rock for That, we'll talk about elixirs and get into that, because I know people have a lot of questions about them. And the other thing that I want to say, too, is that, again, I'm not giving you medical advice here. I'm not saying that, okay, you get a piece of Malachite and you're good, you're protected from this pandemic. And, that's not what I'm saying. I think what's happening now is that because this is affecting so many people, it's really important to be taking good care of ourselves, keeping our bodies healthy and strong as much as we can without, overdoing it or going out of our way to do weird stuff that may cause more harm than good. Okay? So, here's what you can do on the crystal front. Work with Malachite. Okay? and there's some other ones. I've already, posted about working with fluoride on your higher heart chakra, the thymus. And a turquoise, if it's real turquoise and you got it, is also a great throat chakra, higher heart area stone to work with. Okay, but fluoride's terrific too. What I have are these green octahedron fluorides. I'm sure if you go to rock shops, you've seen those. Those are pretty common, inexpensive, easy to get. And I've been doing my own from crystal layouts, body layouts where I placed that stone on the higher heart area, and blue fluorite or turquoise on the throat chakra, because those are the areas most affected by COVID-19, right? We're talking about this being a respiratory infection. A lot of people are having throat issues that get infected with it. Mucus is the problem, okay? Meaning that, this virus attacks the body in a very specific way, and you're really in trouble if it turns into pneumonia. So we want to try and stay as healthy as we can. So, okay, enough on that. Again, I'm not a doctor. Okay, so malachite. Well, malachite is a copper carbonate hydroxide mineral. And again, it's opaque, so we don't always think of it as a crystal if it's opaque, right? Usually when we want crystals that look sort of like, we can see through them, they're very quartzy, that kind of thing. Malachite, not so quartzy, but beautiful. Forms in what they call bitroidal fibrous or stalagmite masses. That's how it naturally forms on the earth, in fractures in deep underground spaces where the water table and hydrothermal fluids provide the means for chemical precipitation. So individual crystals all by themselves are rare, but they occur, but those are the very slender ones that you never really see in the shops. Often what you'll see is malachite with azurite crystals, because they can occur together. So you got the green and then you got the blue, and those are really pretty. Those are what we call pseudomorphs, right? And it's like when a crystal or a mineral stone forms after another big block or big tabular structure of a different crystal like azurite happens, and you often find malachite with it. So I have a raw piece of malachite with azurite, problems you're not looking for, right? But the history of malachite is really interesting, the word malachite actually translate, it's comes from Latin into Middle French, Middle English, and it means mallow green stone. Malachite is the kind of root word, which means mallow, and the mineral was given this name because it resembled the leaves of a mallow plant, M-A-L-L-O-W. And so malachite was extensively mined at the Great Orme mines in Britain 3,800 years ago. At that time, they were using stone and bone tools, and archaeological evidence indicates that the mining activity ended at around 600 BCE, and over, 1,700 tons of copper was being produced from the mined malachite. Archaeological evidence also indicates the mineral has been mined and smelted to obtain copper in the Timna Valley in Israel more than 3,000 years ago. And, so it has this real connection to copper. Again, that can have these toxic properties to it that, cause us to really caution people just to work with polished versions of malachite. And malachite often results from the weathering of copper ores, okay? In addition to azurite, often found with goethite and calcite. And, it's interesting to note that, when you have malachite with azurite, it's usually associated with copper deposits around limestone, which is a source of the carbonate in it. And large quantities of malachite have been mined in the Urals in Russia, and that's not going on as at the present time, though. But I think it's really interesting to note this connection to copper. And again, I was told just to give all the information and not spend a lot of time analyzing it, because I'm an analyst by nature. I used to be an analyst by trade back when I was in the Army. But so more information about malachite. It was used as a mineral pigment in green paints from antiquity until about 1800, I think, in the Common Era. The pigment is moderately light, fast, sensitive to acids, varies in colors. But you can see why they would use it, because it's such, a beautiful green color. And it was later, of course, like many things, and when it comes to pigments and paints and stuff, it was later replaced by a synthetic green. In fact, verditer and just a lot of different synthetic greens. Way back in the day, they didn't have those, so they were, smashing up malachite instead to mix in to get that beautiful green color in their paintings. And there's a malachite room at the Hermitage Museum. Has a huge malachite vase, and there's a malachite room in Mexico City at the Castillo de Chapultepec. All over the world, you have these beautiful, samples or displays of malachite. Now, it's really interesting, because now we get into like some of the other historical aspects of this. And if you're into the myth, the legend, and the lore behind crystals, one of my favorite books that I can recommend is Gems in Myth, Legend, and Lore by Bruce G. Nuth. And Nuth is spelled K-N-U-T-H. And in the book, it goes into a lot of the different things that we talked about. And just because I'm supposed to give you all the information about this, let's take a look at some of the lore here. And, malachite was well known to the ancient Egyptians. They mined the stone in an area between Mount Sinai and the Suez as early as 4000 BC. It was carved into amulets and scarabs and was thought to be a protective stone for children. If tied to a cradle, all evil was kept away and the child slept soundly. The image of the sun was engraved into malachite to protect the wearer from the spells of evil spirits. And this comes from the sun serving as the natural enemy of demons and spirits of darkness. It was believed back then. It was also considered a defense against venomous creatures. Egyptian hieroglyphs describe malachite as an integral part of their deity's existence. The stone is thought to have been the green bed of the sun, Horus on his green, and the malachite lakes in which the gods are sometimes said to dwell. And again, we talked about the modern name coming from the Greek, the Latin, for their they saw, a connection to the way the deep green colors resemble the leaves of the mallow plant. In the Middle Ages, there was kind of a big expansion of what the ancients had believed about the power of malachite. As an amulet, it would turn aside fainting spells, prevent hernia, prevent injury from falls. Powdered and mixed with milk, it served as a tonic for colic and cardiac pain. Now, again, we don't want to do this. We do not want to drink malachite. We don't want to powder it, anything. But this is what they were doing in the Middle Ages, where, they had plagues, right? They were being forced to take some extreme measures in some ways. And they would even apply directly to the body this mixture of milk with it, and it to relieve cramps and muscle pains. They would mix it with honey and apply it to a wound to stop the flow. There's a lapidus, the speculum lapidum, that came out in 1502, but it was an Italian physician, Leonardus, that said, the virtue of the stone is to defend infants from adverse casualties and preserve the cradle from hurtful fantasies. Modern midwives in Bavaria still prescribe pieces of malachite strung on necklaces to relieve the pain of teething, cut in a triangle, which is a Christian form, so that the banding in the stone forms an eye. It is still used in Italy as a talisman against the evil eye. Modern gym therapists suggest the stone as a protection from newer hazards. Okay? Does that kind of stick out to you? That kind of sticks out to me. It is worn as a guard against the radiation generated by fluorescent lights, computers, X-ray machines, and microwaves. So we're talking about EMF, right? People that are worried about electromagnetic frequency radiation. You know, that malachite is a stone for that. It's also said to be helpful in the treatment of asthma, arthritis, swollen joints, tumors, and growths. So that is what the information that I was able to get out of my kind of modern lapidary there. And then, you know, one of my favorite people, and I'm sure one of your favorite people too, when it comes to the world of crystal knowledge, is Judy Hall. So I pulled out my crystal Bible to see what Judy Hall, who has been a guest on There's a Rock for That in its previous incarnation, and is somebody that I really do have a lot of respect for, because I know she's dedicated her life in so many ways to learning more about stones and sharing that information and studying it, writing theses on it. But what she says about malachite is, you know, that it's a powerful stone, but one that needs to be handled with caution, just like I was telling you. Best used under the supervision of a qualified crystal therapist. It is toxic and should be used only in its polished form. Avoid breathing its dust. If used as a gem elixir, apply externally only, or make by the indirect, with a lot of what I've already told you. And I think just repeating it, you know, coming from her is helpful. Like, you know, don't mess with this. Now, being used only under the supervision of a gym therapist, I disagree with that. As long as people are working with polished forms and they're not licking it or putting it, you know, in their mouth or in their bathtub with them, then, you know, if you're smart, I don't think that you need the supervision of a, you know, crystal healing practitioner. I am one. I'm also crystal Reiki master, and I'm telling you it's okay, the polished form, if you're not, you know, doing anything to try to absorb the minerals. We're not talking about absorbing the minerals. We're talking about working with the energy of malachite, okay? Okay to do body layouts with this too. You know, keep your clothes on when you do it though. You know, I wouldn't put it like, you know, on the physical body necessarily. I don't think that probably a lot of you are doing your crystal layouts in the nude, but if you are, you know, I would say put like a little towel. I don't know. You know, really, that just is the first time I've even considered that some people might be doing that in the nude. Anyways, I'm getting off track. So let's go back to what Judy Hall has to share with us about malachite. Okay, amplifies, right? Malachite amplifies both positive and negative energies. Positive and negative energies. It grounds spiritual energies onto the planet. It is believed by some people that malachite is still evolving and will be one of the most important healing stones of the new millennium. Okay. Wow. right? That because like I'm reading this for the first time, actually, or I guess I've read this before, but just I don't know, that didn't stick out to me before. This book was copyrights 2003. Okay, so something to think about it. It's evolving. Okay, and also amplifies both positive and negative energies. It's something you got to think about, people. Where is your energy at when you're working with this stone? Okay? You got to get positive. Now, I'm not somebody who's always saying, like, oh, you got to be positive. Be positive. Everybody just be positive. I'm not that person. Okay? But I'm saying that, like, that idea of being positive is incredibly in the middle of a crisis like we're going through right now. Okay? We got to keep it together, man. All right? So remember that. If you're working with Malachite, wait till you can get your energy in a positive space and then work with it, All right. And back to Judy Hall here. What else is important here? Although that blew my mind that it's still evolving and will be one of the most important healing stones. No wonder it was like trying to get my attention because I wasn't thinking about Malachite at all, to tell you the truth. It's already an important protection stone. It absorbs negative energies and pollutants easily, picking them up from the atmosphere and from the body. It should be cleansed before and after by placing it on a quartz cluster in the sun. Do not use salt, which will damage the surface. You don't want to put it in water either. Okay? You can clear this on a quartz crystal, preferably by placing that in the sun. You want to make sure that there's nothing that catches on fire around it. Put it in a bowl or something, because we know sometimes when the sun hits quartz in the right way and refracts off of something else, like a window, we can have a problem, right? So just placing it on a quartz crystal will work. If you don't have a big cluster like that, put it in a little bag with, stones that cleanse other stones. Have some quartz in there. You could have carnelian in there too. Whatever, however you want to do it. Selenite, it's another one I'd throw in the bag with it if you're doing it that way. Okay, we talked about cleansing of it. Malachite soaks up plutonium pollution and guards against radiation of all kinds. It should be placed in the home of anyone who lives near a nuclear or natural radiation source. It also clears electromagnetic pollution, we talked about that, and heals earth energies. Has a strong affinity with nature and the Davic forces. Okay? Nature spirits. Clears and activates the chakras and attunes to spiritual guidance. Placed on the third eye, it activates visualization and psychic vision. On the heart, it brings balance and harmony. It opens the heart for unconditional love. Malachite can be used for scrying to access other worlds or inner or outer worlds. Journeying through its convoluted patterns, and so those little circles and squiggles you see in Malachite. But journeying through those releases the mind and stimulates pictures. So that's scrying and psychic visualization. It can assist in receiving insights from the subconscious or messages from the future. Psychologically, Malachite is a stone of transformation. Life is lived more intensely under the influence of this adventurous stone, which encourages risk-taking and change. It mercilessly shows what is blocking your spiritual growth. Malachite draws out deep feelings and psychosomatic causes, breaks unwanted ties and outworn patterns, and teaches how to take responsibility for one's actions, thoughts, and feelings. It is a stone that helps develop empathy with other people. Like, hello? What we're going through now, we're all in this together. We've got to develop our empathy if it's not, easily accessible. And showing in doing that, it shows how it feels to place. Because, what's interesting to me about that is that right now it seems like this pandemic, and maybe that's the nature of pandemics, they travel, and you have different apexes of the peak. It gets, worse in some places first, and then goes, keeps traveling across. And that's why, if you listen to the news, they're talking about how, New York is approaching their apex. There's other places that are, they're going to have the rise to the curve that we're all trying to flatten with our social distancing and cleanliness. It's interesting to me that this is a stone that is helping us develop our empathy, helping us to feel what it's like to be in the place of somebody else. So if you're in the middle of someplace where you don't really feel like you're being affected by this pandemic, and you look at it and you see what's going on in New York right now, I think it's important to be able to kind of put yourself in the place of the people in New York, empathetically, to have compassion for it, to care about what's happening there, and to understand what people are going through there, so you can be supportive, so you can hold space, so you can lend your prayers and your thoughts and send your healing vibes. We're all in this together. We all need each other, even if we're not in the midst of the chaos. We need to be able to hold space for those who are. Okay, and that's interesting. That Malachite's connected to that. So we get it mentally. It gets to the core of the problem, which is interesting. We have a situation here that we can't completely put our finger on. How to deal with it. And exactly what's going on. And so working with Malachite, I wish all our leaders all over the world and the World Health Organization, I'd love to send them all a piece of Malachite and say, just keep it in your pocket. See if anything comes about, right? Because that's what happens. A lot of times, we don't make the connections. I think that there's people that have crystals in their home, or they're wearing them as jewelry, and there are people that are not into crystals at all, right? And yet, that maybe, they're experiencing the benefits and the effect, right? So that's something to think about. It's not like it's not like a religion, right? It's not like a thing where you must believe in the crystals and you must worship them. That's not what we do. Yeah, they don't require that we believe in them in order for us to benefit from them. And that's what's so great about them. No dogma. Unless you want to invent your own. I'm not saying that, that doesn't happen. I've seen it happen, and, peace be with you if that's your thing. I'm cool with it, to each their own. And let's get more into some of these placements. So, we talked about the third eye, for enhancing our psychic abilities and getting visions. And we talked about the heart chakra. But here's the other thing that's interesting. Placed on the solar plexus, Malachite facilitates deep emotional healing. It releases negative experiences and old traumas, bringing suppressed feelings to the surface and restoring the ability to breathe deeply. Breathing deeply. Okay. At this point, it balances the heart and navel chakras, revealing insights. At an emotional level, it may make moods more intense, but quick to change. Malachite can be used for inner exploration, stimulating dreams, bringing memories vividly to life, but it may need to be supported in the healing and transformation process by other stones. Okay. So a great combination stone with Malachite, if you're going to go deep, the deep healing level, and try to deal with some traumas that maybe are repressed, and that you feel like, okay, I want to deal with this. Sometimes it's a bit like shadow work. only with crystals. And sometimes I definitely do recommend that people don't necessarily approach that alone all the time. It depends on the person. It really depends on the person. But if you're somebody who it feels like this is an important time for you to do that, I would recommend chrysocolla, okay, because it's a stone that symbolizes wholeness and peace and really helps like balance things. So anytime we work with, the deep-seated things that we're trying to bring to the surface, malachite's a great stone to bring them to the surface and make you ready for the changes you want to make. But I think chrysocolla is also a great stone to have on hand and be working with side by side, along with rose quartz. Because rose quartz, it's all about the love, And I would say rose quartz is also a great stone for this time, just to feel the love and support that stone has to offer. I think is pretty vital regardless of what we're experiencing. It's pretty vital anytime, but especially now. That's another one that I would say. But malachite, extremely versatile, healing stone when you really think about it. Some of these connections already are really kind of interesting. Now, Judy Hall will really go into some depth when it comes to physical healing with crystals. And again, I don't view this, I'm not recommending this as a substitute to any medical advice from mainstream medicine or, if you're into alternative medicine. I think of working with crystals as a complementary medicine, complementing the other things that we're doing, giving us emotional, spiritual support often. But, I am going to share some of these things, other things that Judy Hall says about malachite on the physical level. She says it's helpful with these things, right? And those include quite a laundry list. Lowering blood pressure, treating asthma, arthritis, epilepsy, fractures, swollen joints, growths, travel sickness. Boy, this pandemic's kind of like a travel sickness when you think about it. Vertigo, tumors, the optic nerve, pancreas, spleen, the parathyroid. It aligns DNA and cellular structure and enhances the immune system. Okay, the immune system. Malachite stimulates the liver to release toxins, reducing acidification of tissues. It treats diabetes when worn around the waist. So, look, that is like pretty intense laundry list of things that this stone can be helpful with. And what's really interesting to me is how many of those things really connect with this pandemic thing. A lot of things about breathing, a lot of things about getting rid of toxins. It's kind of fascinating. And another direction that I was encouraged to go with this, finally, and getting this message out from malachite, was to go through the various little guidebooks that I have. I have a lot of like crystal oracle decks and stuff, right? And I thought, like, what messages did all these different people come up with? And what's really interesting is, like, the message is usually about healing. The message is usually about nature and the cycles of nature. This is a pandemic, coming from the natural world. It's a zoonotic virus. Which they think now, shares a lot of DNA with bats, the virus itself, and also even more so, it seems more closely related to viruses that the pangolins, the most heavily trafficked animal in the world illegally. They're, they can get coronaviruses very, very similar, only almost like 99% similar to COVID-19. But, in all these different guidebooks, they're talking about nature. They're talking about healing. And, the stone is considered to still be evolving, So, to me, that's almost like a virus mutating, a stone evolving. It's like there's a parallel there. And again, I'm not supposed to be analyzing this. But I thought that was interesting that all of the guidebooks that I have that include Malachite that, are for crystal oracle decks talk about that. And one that really I thought kind of differed a little bit was Colette Baron Reed's The Crystal Spirits Oracle. And what she says about Malachite is it's really like the message she got from the crystal spirit of Malachite was about clarity of thought and emotions, the right use of the intellect, integrating thoughts and intuition. And this message really struck me because she goes on to say, overthinking can make you feel like you are starting to lose it. That Malachite spirit has appeared to let you know that there is a difference between unproductive ruminating and taking the time to apply logic that can help you make some sense of what you know. Reasoning with clarity means the right use of your intellect as you consider all the evidence you have encountered. This includes evidence produced by opening yourself to messages from the conscious universe through your first sense, intuition. Your reasoning powers are at their peak right now, so let go of any old beliefs that would make you doubt Malachite's message, which is so to trust that you are smart enough to sort through all the information in front of you. Okay? So to me, out of all the different little guidebooks that I was reading and seeing like, okay, this is more of what I have at my fingertips, I guess. I should look at this stuff. That really struck me because I don't know if you are like me and are getting somewhat bombarded by some really just wild-ass conspiracy theories about this pandemic, right? And my feeling is like, okay, on the one hand, as long as people are still doing what they need to do to protect themselves and others, that they're doing the social distancing and that they're doing the sanitizing, that they're washing their hands 20 seconds with soap, that they're, sanitizing frequently touched surfaces. As long as they're doing those things, then, entertain whatever conspiracy theory you want to. I'm just getting bombarded by them. And so I think this message about like, hey, you can handle all the information in front of you, but use your head, people. Use your head, because what's really serving you or not? If you're getting into stuff that is just causing more fear and more anxiety and more stress and thus lowering your immunities, okay? We can't forget the impact that our emotions have on our immune systems, So, just keep it in mind. Keep your head on your shoulders. We got this. We're going to get through this, all right? And some of us it's going to be difficult. And for the majority of us, it is going to be difficult. Some of us it's going to be harder. And yet, we need to, remember, Malachite helps develop empathy. We've got to be there for each other. All right. Well, I am at the bottom of the show here. I'm kind of past the bottom of the show, actually. I feel like that is all the information to give to you about Malachite. I'm going to take a quick look at what's coming up on the Psychic Talk Radio Network. And if you haven't yet, please remember that we do have a Facebook group. And we also have the Tarot Guild Facebook group as well. This show and others is brought to you by the Tarot Guild. And so I want you to, know that you have a place where you can connect with the hosts on the radio network and our listener audience. We have a lot of people in both of those groups. And the chat, I should have mentioned at the beginning, but you may have seen it on all the advertising. The chat at is at thetarotguild.com/chat. That's where we have our chat rooms. I'll be looking in the chat room. There, I see Sharona Rapsick, the host of Magic Universe, and Dax Carlisle in there. They're having a conversation. Hello, Dax. Hello, Sharona. All right, so what's coming up on the Psychic Talk Radio Network this week? Monday is our next show, April 6th. That is going to be at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. It's the Wisdom of the Soul show with your host, Janice Fuchs. That will be followed 2 hours later at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, the Compassionate Light Healing and Guidance show with your host, Catherine Hahn, talking about the abundance mindset. Then on Friday, the doctors are in with host Dr. Rose Wilkerson and Dr. Dax Carlisle. They'll be having open lines all show long and doing tarot mini readings, and they're going to be talking about taking advantage of troubled times. Then I'll be back next Saturday, April 11th, on the Tarot Today radio show with my co-host Dax Carlisle. We'll have open lines all show long and do tarot mini readings. And we have a special guest for you, Janet Boyer, tarot deck creator and author. Janet Boyer is going to come on. So that's going to be exciting. And then I'll be back next Sunday, too, on April 12th. I am so excited to be a guest on the Magic Universe with host Sharona Rapsick on Sunday, April 12th. We're going to have open lines and do mini readings, and we're going to be talking more about crystal grids. So that's what's coming up on the network. If you didn't catch all that and you need to be reminded or you want to keep track of it, you can go to psychictalk.net/upcoming. You'll see them all listed there with show times and all good stuff. And again, joining our Facebook group, way to keep up with everything and get little reminders. Dax and a lot of our hosts are always posting, what their show times are, what they're going to be discussing, that kind of stuff. And I post a card of the day every day in our Psychic Talk Radio Facebook group. The card for today is actually coming from the Crystal Reading Cards by Rachel Sharman, artwork by Chayote Carter, and it is the card for Malachite. And the message is about healing. So we definitely talked a lot about that today. But you can see the card, and it, what's great about it is like the beautiful picture of Malachite, and painted, illustrated, enhanced. But you can see like the swirls that we were talking about, journeying through the swirls and the Malachite, like Judy Hall described. Actually, what's interesting is that we've only got like 11 minutes left in the show. That's kind of interesting. A lot of information. It was more informative than more about the information than divination today on There's a Rock for That. So I had like a full switchboard, and I think everybody's like, oh, my God, she's never going to take calls. So, yeah, I'm sorry about that. But there are a couple other messages that I do need to share. And it's weird. I wasn't going to, but then I kind of got prompted to. And so here's the deal. I talked at the beginning about getting this kind of urgent prodding and message from Malachite, the crystal deva of Malachite, the spirit of Malachite. And, that wasn't the only prodding or message that I got concerning this time, this pandemic that we are going through. Got a couple other strange messages too, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and share those with you. And I can say going into it, it's very unusual, let's say, for me to get messages from specific religious figures. Although, I'm hearing that that's happening to a lot of other psychics and readers out there right now. I would say that a couple just random thoughts on this whole situation is, one, I think the veil is really thin right now. Okay, we talk about the thinning of the veil usually around the different